let's get to the potential downside, at least the hottest segment that we'll cover today, inflation. People like to say, Krystal, that you and I were very wrong about inflation. So the inflation numbers came out yesterday, and let's put that up there on the screen. Where are Americans seeing inflation? We saw a 5% jump in inflation. It's the highest on record over 13 years. Sounds scary. Well, here's where there is inflation. Rental cars are up 43% over last September. I can attest to that personally. Gas, 42%. Used cars, 24%. Bacon, 19%. Hotels, 18%. Beef, pork, and eggs, this is where things are concerning because it hits a grocery store. 18% for beef, 13% for pork, 13% for eggs, 13% for TVs, kids' shoes, furnitures, new cars at 9%. Yeah, I was wondering that. I think it has something to do with China, given how much of it comes from over there. It's a highly replaceable product. Chicken at 8%, apples at 8%, restaurant prices at 5%, that's because of food costs, electricity at 5%, rent at 2.9%. Obviously, rent, food, gonna be the most important ones. So this has sparked a lot of discussion. Now, Krystal, here's part of the question. There was a big question of whether there was something called transitory inflation or sustained inflation. Transitory would presume, hey, we're living through this really crazy time here in America. It's all, this pandemic, things got shut down, now they're back. Turns out when you shut down the global supply chain for like an entire year, there's some crazy stuff happens in terms of prices. That was a transitory school of thought. Now people are saying that because that has been lasted now for months longer, it's not transitory. Transitory in those people's minds was supposed to mean like 2 months or 3 months. Well, I'm here to piss off everybody and actually say, I actually think the team transitory won. And I'll tell you why. And I already know core CPI, which is the consumer price index, is not the correct way to track inflation. But in the way that you're talking about it, in terms of what is actually impacted by the money supply, well, it looks like Team Transitory won. Put this next one up there on the screen. This is for the people who are just listening. What you're seeing here is a wild fluctuation in core CPI that happened between January 18th and January 20th, largely because of the pandemic. Well, it turns out that our core CPI is actually back to 2.09%, which is the baseline. However, where are we still seeing inflation? Inflation being defined as increase in price relative to previous. Well, we're seeing, as I previously stated, in the rental car market, in hotels, gas, used cars, bacon, all of these. I'm sorry to say, everybody, for those who are the gold bugs out there who want you to believe this is all about spending, not a single one of these things has to do with increased spending. Rental cars, yeah, you know why the price is up relative to September? Because nobody was driving last September. Why is gas up? Well, it's because OPEC is not pumping in enough gas, and it turns out that when people don't drive for a year, and then they start driving again, and you have to readjust supply, well, it takes a little while to catch up. Used cars, same thing. It's because you can't buy a new car, because there's no semiconductors. Right. Bacon, well, actually, there's new animal welfare regulations out in California. You can stand by it or not. It's totally fine. Whichever way you stand, that's actually disrupting our pig market. Also, we had to slaughter a ton of pigs back in 2020 because they couldn't keep up with the meat packing plants and the demand.
Because there was massive COVID outbreak.
Right, so we have an artificially restricted supply. Also, the Chinese, it turns out, eat a lot of pigs. So they're buying our pork as well, which means there's an increase in price. I know some people don't want to hear this. I don't really know why. I actually think it's a fascinating and nuanced conversation around supply chains, what exactly happens whenever you shut down an economy and reopen an economy. But that's that. We have high inflation, quote unquote, on certain goods, especially on food and more, but almost all of it can be rooted back to the supply chain. I'm not diminishing this for people's pocketbooks who are at home. If you're out there and you're buying groceries, listen, you ever try to buy a steak recently? It's like, what the hell is going on? However, I would just encourage you to say, doesn't have a lot to do with spending because you are falling into the traps that a lot of people are who are trying to push against basically the government doing anything for anybody and scaremongering instead of focusing on where the real issue is, which is our globalized, idiotic supply chain.
I feel like a lot of people have a weird investment in inflation.
Like, they really do. I don't get it.
And I'm not talking about, look, for individual people who are seeing their grocery bills go up, who are struggling to get the gas tank filled up, like, this is not to diminish your concerns and the real pain that this causes. And even as wages have actually for the, significantly increased, like a couple of %, pretty crazy stuff, the inflation of things like food, things like rent, things like gas, that's obviously going to significantly eat into any wage increases that you may be experiencing. We're just trying to follow the numbers of what's actually going on.
Yes.
And so you have a group of people who are very ideologically invested in inflation being high because they want to prove a political point. And a lot of these are the same people who have been predicting hyperinflation for more than a decade now.
Literally, quantitative easing is going to cause hyperinflation.
Right.
They were saying that in 2009.
Yeah.
Okay?
So, you know, they finally like see a little uptick in one measure of inflation. They're like, yes, we were right. And it's like, yeah, but you've been wrong for more than a decade now. Where's the reckoning over that? There's just this, it's a very ideological way of looking at these things. For those of you who don't know, core price inflation is just cost of goods and services, the change in those prices, minus those from the food and energy sectors, which are always the most volatile. So the whole idea of it is you sort of strip out the ones that go up and down the most. What's the core price inflation when you take out those most volatile things, and that's what that metric ultimately is. Now, in terms of your pocketbook, what they're effectively taking out are the things that are most relevant likely to you and to what your household bottom line is. So I don't want to dismiss the concerns. I don't want to say it's nothing. I don't want to say that, you know, it's irrelevant and it's going to be back to normal next month. But I think it's just really important to take a look at the numbers and what they're saying, and also take a look at the factors that are driving it, one of which we're about to cover, which is this massive supply chain disruptions, which are making it very difficult to actually get goods on the shelves. So you have more money chasing more goods than are able to be available. Well, yeah, that's going to cause a spike in inflation. Hopefully those supply chain disruptions are temporary and don't ultimately last. There is one small silver lining here that we can throw up on the screen here, which is that senior citizens are getting a raise. American seniors on Social Security will get a 5.9% increase in their payments. That is the highest increase since 1982. I saw it's something like $90 a month more that seniors will be receiving. So that's not nothing. Of course, you know, you got to balance that with the fact that they're probably paying higher prices at the pump, paying higher prices in the grocery store, but ultimately Social Security will be going up. And then this is kind of funny and kind of, I mean, it's sort of pathetic, honestly. Let's throw this next tear sheet up on the screen. The Biden administration knows they have a big problem with all of this, especially with gas prices, which presidents don't really have a lot of control over, if any control over whatsoever. But that doesn't mean that it's not politically extremely damaging to them when energy prices are high. The White House is asking U.S. oil and gas companies to help lower fuel costs, according to some sources. This is a Reuters article here. How do you think that's going to work, Saagar? You think they're going to nicely be like, oh, sure, we'll cut down on our profit margins, no problem.
What? We'll get right on it. I really am, and this will segue very well to our next segment, is that I think that this winter is going to be a disaster for them. Number one is gas prices continue to stay high. Two is that natural gas prices right now are sky high because supply was reduced during COVID.
Yeah.
Europe and Asia are also reopening, and we have all sorts of supply problems whenever it comes to that. So guess what we use a lot of natural gas for? Heating your house, which means your heating bill, I would not be surprised if it's 2 or 3 times what it normally is, and people are going to freak out about that.
Bad news.
And it's terrible news because what happens? People get their heat shut off in the cold. It's going to have a lot of terrible stories.
The elderly in particular. Suffer with
really need to have their heating and gas. So by the way, if that starts happening, please send us those stories so that we can highlight it, because that should not be happening, especially if there's a massive supply crunch and all of that. And we can get to that later. But you're going to have high gas price, you're going to have high heating price, and Christmas. Not going to be able to get your goods.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.